Canada has been ripping us off for years on tariffs for lumber and for dairy products. 250%, nobody ever talks about that. 250% tariff, which is taking advantage of our farmers, so that's not gonna happen anymore. They'll be met with the exact same tariff unless they drop it.
President Trump made those comments on Friday, threatening new tariffs yet again on Canada that could come as early as this week. That's on top of the already announced tariffs on steel and aluminum that are planned for Wednesday. I asked Minister LeBlanc about that. Michael Froman served as U.S. Trade Representative during President Barack Obama's second administration. He's now President of the Council on Foreign Relations. I spoke with Ambassador Froman about Trump's decision to pause tariffs on some Canadian goods and how he's leveraging them. Ambassador Michael Froman, nice to see you. Thank you for being here.
Thanks for having me.
I want to start with sort of where we are on the latest between the United States and Canada, and that is this pause on most Canadian goods until April 2nd, although the steel and aluminum tariff sounds like it's going to go ahead next week. What do you make of this latest move by the president?
Well, I think it's very unclear sort of what is on again, off again when it comes to these tariffs, not just against Canada, but against some of our other major trading partners as well. You know, I think like the president has made clear that tariffs are a critical tool in his toolbox, both for economic and for non-economic issues. It's a source of leverage, and as a source of leverage, it's proven to be pretty productive in terms of bringing countries to the table to have conversations about outstanding issues. It's a source of revenue, which is a much more difficult or complicated story. We know from Trump 1 that they collected about $70 billion in tariffs on China, but gave $62 billion to American farmers to compensate for Chinese retaliation. And it's a way of trying to encourage companies to move their production to the United States. And that, too, is very complicated, particularly when there's so much uncertainty about what the tariff regime is actually going to be.
Yeah, I mean, he seemed to, again, on Thursday, talk about the auto sector as a desire to have everything onshored into the United States. Is that even possible, like remotely probable that an auto company would decide to do that?
Well, it is possible. Of course, the North American auto sector is a highly integrated sector across both Canada and Mexico and the United States. I mean, conceivably, if companies felt like the tariffs were likely to be put in place or that there was so much uncertainty around this that it would make sense to consolidate their production in the United States, they could. And certainly the differential in labor rates between the United States and Canada is not at all significant. So there's no particular cost to that. But I think companies want certainty. They abhor uncertainty, and particularly when it comes to making big capital decisions. Until this gets sorted out, I would not expect the big three or anybody else to be moving their production from Canada to the United States.
How much do you think the market reaction influenced Donald Trump's decision to allow another pause?
I think it's unclear. I mean, yes, the stock market went down, then it came back up a bit. You know, the stock market is very volatile, and there are lots of factors that go into it. I've actually been watching the bond market, which is quite interesting. You would expect the talk of tariffs to raise concerns about inflation. You'd want to see that, or you could potentially see that in the bond market, but instead you're seeing long rates come down. And so it's a little unclear right now what the market signal is.
When you and I talked during Trump 1, we went back and looked, and one of the things you smartly brought up at the time was dairy and supply management, which has been a subject of some of the conversations that Donald Trump and Justin Trudeau have had. Is this something that you think Canada needs to put on the table because it is so problematic for the administration?
You know, I think they do. I mean, we have a very close relationship, obviously, between the U.S. And Canada, but there are serious trade irritants that have been around for a very, very long time. Dairy is one of them. There's issues around some other products like sugar. Softwood lumber has been around. I remember when I was U.S. Trade Representative, somebody told me the initial dispute with Canada actually goes back to the early 1800s. So these are the kinds of issues where I think what President Trump is trying to convey is business as usual is not going to work. And we're not going to just accept the kind of delay or marginal improvements. Yeah. We're going to want to see some fundamental changes. And I think that's going to require countries to take a hard look at some of these issues.
Do you think that his strategy, his commitment to using tariffs, do you think it makes sense for trade in the world and on this continent?
Look, tariffs will raise the cost to consumers and intermediate users of products. It could potentially add to upward pressure on inflation and the cost of living. It is not pro efficiency or pro growth, but it is a tool. And I think what this president has indicated is that the emphasis on efficiency and the emphasis on consumer welfare, those are important values, but they are not our only important values. And he's got this sense that other countries have long taken advantage of the U.S., and he wants to bring that to an end, and tariffs is one of his tools for doing that.
The Canadian government, as you know, hit back with $30 billion worth of counter tariffs, has paused another second wave of $125 billion. Do you think that is the right approach? I understand you're not Canadian, but in terms of what we can do to try to protect ourselves, does that make sense to you?
Well, it's not surprising to me that countries would retaliate, whether it's tit for tat on tariffs, or in the case of China, for example, they may impose tariffs on some products. They may restrict access to some critical minerals or other products that are critical to our supply chain as other mechanisms. So countries do tend to stand up for their own interests, and when tariffs get imposed, they tend to resort to that. I think the critical thing for all the parties involved is to ultimately to get to the table and to see what needs to be done to reestablish sort of normal trading patterns. It's challenging because I think when it comes to fentanyl or migration, two of the issues that the president has talked about, these are very serious issues with regard to our southern border. They are less significant issues when it comes to our northern border. Yeah. I think something like 50 pounds or 40 pounds of fentanyl came in over the northern border into the United States, and 25,000 illegal migrants. That pales in comparison to the southern side. So, as a former trade negotiator, I love leverage. I think that the use of tariffs are a potential source of leverage. But for leverage to be real, you have to take it out for a drive. You have to say what it is you want the other country to do. And I have not yet heard a full articulation of what it is Canada is to do to get back into good stead with the United States.
Yes, which makes it very hard at the negotiating table for Canada. I'll just end on this. I'm sure you heard Prime Minister Trudeau talk about what he believes the motivation for the president is, which is economic collapse and annexation of this country. And that has really frightened a lot of Canadians, frankly, that Donald Trump has been saying these kinds of things. Do you find that concerning, that language?
I don't take those particular words at sort of face value. I think a lot of what the president does is present ideas in unconventional ways, but underlying what he says, there's oftentimes a grain of something that needs to be taken seriously. When he talks about Greenland, for example, I don't think we're going to take over Greenland or that Greenland's going to become part of the U.S., but should we be more concerned about Arctic security? Absolutely. Should we be concerned about Russia and China cooperating in the Arctic, or how the melting of the polar ice caps is going to change trading routes? Absolutely. So I think bringing attention to issues, even if it's done in an unconventional way, I think that's how we should take those sorts of statements. Okay.
Ambassador Michael Froman, thank you for your time. I appreciate it very much.
My pleasure.
More tariffs on Canada expected in the coming weeks. So we're going to start on our American Roundtable with that. Josh Wingrove, White House reporter for Bloomberg News. He's in Washington. Darlene Superville, White House reporter with the Associated Press in Kissimmee, Florida. Good morning to both of you. Nice to see you.
Great.
Josh, I'll start with you because you've been asking a lot of questions of the president about tariffs, not just on Canada, but right across the board. What's your read of his strategy here and his ongoing focus on Canada?
The guy wants tariffs, I think is the short version of this. And there's a few streams here, and it's been difficult to track. So if you'll give me a brief moment, I'll run through. We, of course, have had the ones that we've been talking about a lot, right? These so-called fentanyl-related tariffs right now on Canada and Mexico that he exempted after much to and fro this week. I mean, my gosh. Tracking that was difficult for those of us whose job it is to do. I can only imagine everyone else. And then we also have those steel and aluminum tariffs coming on Wednesday. That's set to hit Canada unless Trump does something. And then next month, this is where it gets fuzzy. And I think there's some, tea leaves to start reading here. both the reciprocal tariffs, which is just an across-the-board number, and the specific sectoral tariffs, including potentially on autos, which of course got a reprieve this week. That's really interesting. Trump this morning in an interview with Maria Bartiromo, a Fox Business host, Fox News host, has said, look, we're going to charge other countries what they charge them. So that kind of throws in the air this question of will there be an auto tariff? Will there not be an auto tariff? I think that is a live question right now. We just simply don't know. The Detroit Three or the Big Three or whatever we're calling them now, that one of them is Stellantis, they have been pushing against these, and they won that 1 month reprieve. We will see whether another reprieve comes. Secretary Lutnick, you heard there, evidently discovering supply management and all the intricacies of that system. He's been railing against that Canadian dairy tariff. Of course, those of us who covered the first U.S. renegotiation that made it USMCA, remember that was one of the last issues. Yeah. It's always been a live wire. Lumber, softwood lumber, my gosh, that's been going since before I was born, before many of us were born. It's just forever. It's the forever trade war. So they're going back to sort of, the greatest hits of the trade fight. We'll see where this goes. But right now, I think you have to take some good news if you're the auto sector from this pause. And right now, we just simply don't know how widespread those April tariffs would be. Although I do think people are sleeping a little bit on the steel and aluminum tariffs. There's no sign that those are going to be paused.
Yeah. Thank you for laying all that out, because you're right. It is very complicated because there are so many different threats. Darlene, what do you think is the goal behind this? Is it about raising revenue? Is it about balancing trade? Is it about onshoring companies? What do you think is the president's strategy?
Well, he has spoke about tariffs and wanting to impose tariffs in the context of raising a lot of money for the United States. We do have a $36 trillion national debt, and he's talked about tariffs in the context of raising money to help pay down that debt. So that's one goal of the president's tariff agenda, if you will. I remember during the campaign, he also talked about tariffs as, helping with immigration, stopping the flow of drugs across the border, also even helping with something like childcare. But I think he's looking at it mostly in the context as a revenue raiser to try to pay down the debt.
The market did not react kindly to this, though, Josh, and we know, of course, that the president pays attention to that. How big a deal was that, do you think, the market response?
I think it's a factor. It's just a question of how big a factor. I mean, it's been not great. Markets hit rough. Many of the indicators that Trump would watch hit highs, in the last few weeks, and they've been all coming down quite a bit on that, whether it's just the S&P or even things like Bitcoin. Trump this week, launching a Bitcoin reserve really tied to the crypto community. So there's sort of warning signs flashing and blinking in every which way. And they have said that they expect some pain, no pain, no gain is sort of their message to Americans right now. They want to reset this economy. They want fewer government employees. They want more private sector employees. They want a tax cut package, which is nowhere near done. And of course, it's an open question as to what Republicans will agree on, if they'll agree on anything later this year. And all that coming together is what Trump has his eye on, sort of a golden age. That is his pitch. That is his vision. In the meantime, what they're saying is it's going to be bumpy. And so the question is not how much of a market impact, it's how big a market impact is too much for him. Everyone seems to be acknowledging there'll be some.
And Darlene, if it starts to hit Americans too, because obviously we're very focused on it, but there's a lot going on down there. I don't know how much Americans are paying attention to this, but they might start paying attention to it if it starts to affect their bottom line and their day-to-day living.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, already there's a lot of headlines in the newspapers and in the news every day about the price of eggs, $6 per dozen. If prices keep going up, consumers will start to feel it, and they'll start to make noise about it. And we'll see how the president responds to that, because a lot of the people who will end up paying higher prices are a lot of the people who voted for him because of his promise that he was going to bring prices down to begin with.
Josh, I want to talk to you a little bit about Elon Musk. There seems to be, according to some reporting, a clash between Marco Rubio, who's going to be in Canada in about a week's time for a foreign ministers meeting, and Elon Musk. What does that tell you about what's going on inside the White House and whether Musk really has as much power as he seems to the rest of us outside of it? Yeah,
the reporting is that Musk is sort of, bumping into, shall we say, some of the cabinet ministers who don't want him to come in with a chainsaw, which of course he posed literally with on stage a few weeks ago, and make drastic cuts, whether you're like the ag department, for instance, trying to bring down the price of eggs or whatnot. And so the reporting is that Rubio and him have clashed over this, that Rubio has been digging in and is less than pleased with, in particular, the cuts to USAID, which implements a lot of foreign aid abroad. Yeah. That is going to be a big one to watch. Rubio, is a huge figure in that cabinet, also in, DC politics. He's got a lot of clout. And so we're watching to see how that goes. I will note Rubio is also headed this week, before he goes to Charlevoix, to Saudi Arabia for these talks on Ukraine. So he's got a full plate right now. So whether Mr. Musk is at the top of Marco Rubio's list, I think it's less than clear. But we'll see where it shakes out.
Darlene, I only have about 30 seconds, but you wrote about Ukraine this week and Trump talking about revoking status for Ukrainian migrants and the fallout from that meeting.
On the Fox interview the president did, he also had some less than kind words for President Zelensky. I think we're still seeing the fallout from their meeting at the White House, more than a week ago.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you both so much. Really appreciate it. I know you're both super busy right now, so squeezing us in is very kind of you. Josh Wingrove and Darlene Superville, have a good rest of your day. Appreciate it.